Chapter live.
Did we hear from
Hey, guys.
anybody?
Hear from anybody?
I didn't know if there was any public comment or anything.
Chapter live.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Good morning, or good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I've been having some technical difficulties getting in, but looks like I think we have everybody here.
Are we getting a little feedback, or is that just my end?
I'm okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I did the same thing, Scott.
Yes, I'm
Um,
okay. No feedback here.
I don't
Okay.
hear any either.
Okay.
So I think we're good to go. So I see Nick, Michelle, myself, Diane, and Dixie. So we have
And
quorum.
And Barbara.
You don't see me?
And yes, I do see you. Sorry, Barbara.
Did you see Nick?
All right, so I apologize. I've got too many things going on. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll call the meeting to order. Khaditra, you've got us squared away. We're going live. We are live. Okay,
we're live.
thank you. All right. So, sorry, I'm having to use two different computer resources. All right, so let's go ahead and call to order. And Khaditra, thank you. Thank you, that helps. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Khaditra, if you would, please, roll call.
Yes, we have Barbara Marchioni,
Yes.
Scott Iden,
Yes.
Michelle Durner,
Here.
Diane Holt,
Here.
Susan, Dixie,
Here,
Nicholas Potter.
Here.
And we're missing Paula Rigsby. All right, roll call complete.
All right, thank you. All right, you guys can see the agenda that is being shared on the screen right now. We have two discussion items today, A and B. So with that, can we have a motion for approval of the agenda, please?
This is Diane. I approve the agenda.
Dixie.
Make a
I
motion.
second.
Motion, thank you.
This is Dixie. I second the motion.
Roll call.
All right, Barbara,
Yes.
Say Dixie. Yes.
Dixie.
Yes.
All right, Michelle,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Sorry, Khaditra, did you, yes, for Scott, sorry, your audio was breaking up there a little.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's a lot of planes that are going, they're outside right now, and I have to do it. All right. So motion says,
All righty. So first item on our discussion items 4A, face coverings policy. Khaditra, can you just, I know that's further down in the packet. Can you go ahead and pull up? There we go. Thank you.
yes. And what I have pulled up now is actually the information that was discussed at the last meeting and the revisions that you all wanted. So just to make sure these are the revisions and that they're accurate. Which were the exceptions to the face covering requirement will be allowed, exception may be allowed at the discretion of school administration. And we took out those remaining bullets. So I will make sure that that's modified on the final version. And then there was another paragraph that we completely omitted that actually referenced staff and students and having the voluntary mask.
That
So that was
voluntary
omitted.
statement. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
Any questions?
so yeah, so sorry. Are there any questions or conversation about this? I'm going to kick that off by understanding how we move this from draft to the school policy. Is that a matter of just altering this document? In other words, I guess my concern is that approving our school's face covering policy, would that mean that this needs to be in a non-draft or a final version?
Scott, I would
Yeah.
recommend,
ahead,
Scott,
Donna.
I would recommend that by looking at this document and making a motion to approve it with whatever edits you want to make, and having that reflected in your minutes will accomplish it. And then I would suggest to you that it would be NHA's task, and I think they're good at this, to produce a final version by inserting the name in the appropriate place and making whatever tweaks you identify in your motion. And then perhaps it would be a good idea to ask them to include the final policy in all of your meeting packets going forward, particularly in light of the fact that you're required by the statute to continue to vote once a month on whether to modify. So I think your task is simply a motion to approve and then incorporate any additional tweaking that you want to do to the draft. And there is one tweak I would suggest just for clarity. Khadija was pointing out that you all got rid of the bulleted exceptions, which were intended to be sort of examples, and you just have exceptions will be allowed at the discretion of school administration. But then your very next section says additional exceptions may be allowed consistent with the toolkit. One thought would be to combine those by saying exceptions may be allowed at the discretion of school administration and consistent with the toolkit.
Okay.
That just cleans that up a little bit.
Mhm.
My question is, does NHA have to approve what the changes that we've made?
No, this is the board's policy.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Cool. Second paragraph, the maintain physical distancing of a minimum of 3 feet to the fullest extent possible. We are not physically able to provide 3 feet between students. We've already added extra tables, several extra tables to our lunchroom, but we still, using all tables, we can't guarantee that minimum. We can say the fullest extent possible. So my recommendation would be just to have physical distancing to the fullest extent possible. When eating, we do have students at assigned seats. If some of them are absent, then they may have 3 feet between people. But that would just be my thought practically from being in the lunchroom every day that I'm on campus.
And Scott, if I may respond to that, I think we talked about this a bit in your last meeting. The original document that was very much intended for you all to do exactly what you're doing, to massage it for your individual school, comes directly from the toolkit.
Yes.
The item that Steve is talking about, though, makes sense to me. I've had other schools who've done exactly that same thing. So it would certainly not be problematic for you to remove the minimum of 3 feet and just have it read physical distancing to the full extent possible.
Thank you, Donna. And I also agree with the previous comment about the discretion of school administration consistent with the toolkit. You know, I like that as well, because it would provide a contradiction. Oh, this says it in here, or the principal said, but we are working through that toolkit as well. But there are things on campus that we are not giving a lot of flexibility because we want to be as consistent as possible across the board. So thank you for mentioning that before.
And does that second paragraph, Steve, with what you proposed with removing essentially the minimum of 3 feet phrasing?
Yes.
Should we say something? Students should maintain physical distancing consistent with the toolkit?
I would just say physical distancing to the fullest extent possible. Because the toolkit, that is the language in the toolkit, a minimum of 3 feet. But then the caveat in there is to the fullest extent possible. So I would recommend just being the boots on the ground. We do assign seats and we have less people per table than we do in the past, but I would propose just maintaining physical distancing to the fullest extent possible. Because we never know when a student's going to be absent or they don't move around, they don't cluster at different tables. But the fullest extent possible will vary, in all honesty.
Understood. Khaditra, are we looking at a PDF, or can you go ahead and make scratch outs and changes here? Or are we looking at a PDF versus a
At a PDF instead of a
live
Word
doc?
document. Mhm.
All
So
right.
I'll reflect in the minutes, the changes that are being made, and then put that in the final document to send Sarah. And what she'll do is update the school specific document with the revisions that I'll provide to her.
And then the board will have both the minutes in your next board packet, as well as the final copy of the policy in your next board packet. And certainly if anybody sees anything that didn't quite get checked off, you'll have the opportunity to do that at that point.
Okay, so the amendments or the changes that we're proposing to this draft is obviously the insertion of Peak Charter Academy as our full school name.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going somewhere. So for the purposes of our motion today and understanding what we are changing or adding to the document, that would be the addition of the school name. That would be the removal of the phrasing minimum of 3 feet so that it reads, should maintain physical distancing so of a minimum of 3 feet will be stricken. And that will read, students should maintain physical distancing to the fullest extent possible when actively eating. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then the third change to the draft would be the consolidation of the first two, I'm going to call them bullet points, but to consolidate the first two phrases there under the second paragraph. Exceptions to the face covering requirement will be
No.
allowed.
That should not have been there, Scott. So it would start with exceptions to face covering requirement may be allowed at the discretion of school administration and consistent with the Strong Schools North Carolina Public Health Toolkit, K-12.
Perfect. So board, any questions, any further questions or analysis we need to do on this document? Any concerns that anybody has that we need to go ahead and capture right now or address?
No concerns for me.
Thanks,
I
Diane.
don't have any idea.
None.
No.
Okay. So let's keep this motion as simple as we can. Well, sorry, I see you're moving on to the refinance piece. Should we go ahead and address this now? I
It's up
say
to
let's
you.
go ahead and
Yeah.
close this. Let's go ahead and close this section out by having a motion. And I believe that motion would be something along the lines of motion. What would the word be, Donna? Motion to approve or establish Peak Charter Academy's face covering policy with amendments as discussed
Yes.
or as
Correct.
documented.
Yes.
Okay, so can we, I don't know if I can make that motion. So can we get a motion from the board?
This is Michelle, so moved.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
This is Barbara, second.
Roll call.
See, Scott,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
Nicholas.
Yes.
All right, motion approved.
All right. So our next item for discussion is 4B, the facility refinance. And I guess I'll start with asking Donna, have we achieved the agreement between Peak Charters Board and NHA?
Not quite. We continue to have what I would say to you have been some good conversations. I've continued to be in communication with their attorney. And as I think you're aware, your fellow boards throughout the state and probably beyond, but certainly in North Carolina, are looking at the same thing. So I'm having the opportunity to participate in those discussions as well. We just had, I guess it was Wake Forest. I'm losing my days earlier this week. So those conversations are continuing. Questions are continuing to be asked, and NHA is sharing information. The critical item that we are still waiting for, and I believe it's what we were talking about perhaps at your meeting last week, is the feedback that NHA has been given on the proposed new management agreement for North Carolina schools. We've not gotten that back from NHA yet. And from my perspective anyway, I think that's going to be fairly critical because consistent with your current relationship, that's really the document that captures the respective responsibilities between NHA and the board and really kind of tells you how this ship's going to be run. My understanding is that we don't really have any disputes about any of the issues. That NHA has commented that they are receptive to making all the changes that we recommended, but we don't have that final document back. I don't know if I mentioned this the other day, but I would encourage board members to continue to look at all the materials that NHA has given you to make sure that you don't have additional questions or concerns, because this is, while doable, this is a fairly significant undertaking. And when it's sort of decision time, the decision will be for the board to vote on a resolution that captures all of this. And I just want to make sure that you guys have had a full opportunity to raise your questions and that you're comfortable at the time that you're getting ready to vote. So that overall process is ongoing. And I would, again, repeat my encouragement to you guys to also continue to do your own examination of the documents. And you are more than welcome to send NHA questions, as I understanding, and Khaditra can confirm that, but certainly questions to me. If there's something you see that you want to be able just to ask me, you're welcome to send me, shoot me an email and send me a question. So that's kind of where things are. The short answer to your question is no, we don't have the final documents yet. So unfortunately, today would not be an opportunity for you to actually vote. And I'm not sure we're quite ready for that anyway, but we certainly want to see this final management agreement from NHA before we move forward.
Well, so Donna, what's your understanding on, one of our objectives for today was to meet the 15th requested deadline by NHA, yet, excuse me, yet we have outstanding issues. So how does that 15th deadline, or sorry, objective date, I don't know that it's a deadline, but how does that come into play?
Sure. My understanding was that, NHA itself, as I understand it, has been working on this project for a good bit of time. And I certainly have had some communications with their lawyer dating back for several months. And it makes sense to me, again, that this is a significant undertaking. There are multiple documents, whatnot, to be reviewed and revised and approved and whatnot. My understanding from them is that NHA wants to give all the boards the opportunity the boards need to review these materials and be comfortable and to make their decisions, but they also want to move the ball forward. And there was a point at which they sought to have decisions made by the 15th. I understood that to be a goal, and we were certainly attempting to assist with that goal. But at the end of the day, it is also my very strong sense that everybody's on the same page that board members and everybody else participating, including attorneys, need to have all the information available to them, and board members need to be comfortable with the decision they're making. So if that takes us past October 15th, which it would certainly appear that's happening, then that's kind of what happens.
So we have this down as a discussion item. We do not have it as an action item on the agenda. So board, would it be beneficial to you guys to have, and Donna, if I recall, and forgive me because I just don't have this committed to memory, I want to say that there were 2 or possibly 3 different specific areas, Donna, that you wanted to see kind of ironed out with respect to the final agreement. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, so, yes, pretty close. I can comment briefly on a couple of them. And I want to be efficient, and I know you guys too, so I'll do whatever you all need and want, but there might be value in having, again, the final document. I can point out kind of exactly what language we're dealing with, but I'll comment briefly. One of the things NHA has in the new proposed management agreement is they modified the hiring of teachers so that the board is no longer involved. And that is doable under the North Carolina statute. It's an option. It is not something any of the boards in North Carolina have done before. And it doesn't really appear to be related to the refinance goal, not in any direct way that I know of, but I just want the board to know that's in there. And either agree to that knowingly, and I've already suggested to them that it's my belief that some of the boards will prefer to keep things as they are with regard to the hiring of teachers. And so if that's the case, then that's going to have to be changed. NHA was fine with that. But it's just something I wanted to point out that is a change. So that's one thing. There are also a couple of provisions regarding legal services. And I've suggested that we want to be real clear who's picking lawyers, paying for lawyers, and what work lawyers are doing either for the board or for somebody else. And they were fine with my comments and questions about that. And so the goal is to revamp that language to make sure it's very clear about the provision of legal services for the board. Those were the 2 primary ones that come to my mind right now.
Donna, you
Yes.
mentioned the board's involvement. What about Steve's involvement as chief administrator for the hiring of new teachers? Will he continue to make his recommendations to NHA should they decide to be more involved than they are currently and remove the board's responsibility?
So the statutory language that we're talking about is in the North Carolina Charter School Statute. And what that statute provides is that the board shall contract with teachers for instructional services in the school. The original idea was that charter schools are supposed to have flexibility, be able to do things differently, consistent with their mission and whatnot. But with regard to the instructional component, the board needed to kind of have its fingers in it a little bit. And so the idea is that even if you go through sort of a typical process where an administrator, an HR person or somebody does the recruiting, the interviewing, the screening and whatnot, that the board would at least weigh in on that final decision on a hire. So that was the original framework of the statute. There was a point 4, 5, 6 years ago where the statute was amended to give the board the other option of fully delegating the hiring of teachers to a management company. And so in that scenario, NHA would handle the entire process. The board would not have a role. And I'll let Steve comment if he needs to, but remember, Steve is your principal, but he's an employee of NHA. So I guess NHA would decide what role principals would have. Can't imagine they wouldn't have a pretty active role in picking their teachers, but you will have the option as the board of saying, no, let's just keep it the way it is. In which case Steve would continue to have his role, you would have your role. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, then I think that would be my follow-up question is, Donna, I mean, you've just described the fundamental differences. And I think Dixie's question is leaning into, so our current state process, we are involved in this and we give the final approval, but we lean into Steve and his staff as far as vetting those candidates and determining who is an appropriate teacher for our school. Donna, if we leave this in, this whole hiring of teachers element, if we leave this in the management agreement and we essentially change what we do current state to the future state of not having a board say so in this, I guess I'm asking your legal opinion, would this fundamentally change the end result of obtaining, screening, and hiring of any applicant at the school? In other words, is there any more descriptive language in there? If we decide to leave this in, do we need to have any kind of expansion on exactly how that process is going to work? In other words, my comfort level as a board member is with our current state process, knowing that Steve, vets all these candidates fully, and that we lean into his understanding as who is the appropriate person to fill any vacancy. So the way the management agreement is drafted at this point, does it, in your legal opinion, does it leave any openings for changing the process where it may, I don't want to say remove Steve from the process, but reduce his authority
Mhm.
Well,
in the current state process?
Right. I understand. I think I understand your question. So in part, I would almost have to defer to NHA to answer that, because I would remind you that the management agreement is between NHA and the board, not any individuals. It's NHA and the board. And so the list of responsibilities within those two sections of the management agreement in both documents, the current document and the future document, sets out what NHA will do. It does not distinguish what, say, a principal will do or a curriculum instructional person will do. And as I said before, the overall model is that the principal is an employee of NHA, of the management company. So what Steve does or doesn't do, or what responsibilities he has, that's NHA's sort of job and business and whatnot.
And Donna, are we just talking about teachers, or are we also including other support staff?
Just teachers.
Okay.
Flowing from the statutory provision, as I was saying before, that in the origin of charter schools, the idea was, charter schools have flexibility, they can do things differently, but at least with regard to the instructional staff, the teachers, the board should be involved. So the language of the statute is that the board shall contract with teachers.
Teachers, okay.
And all other personnel is the responsibility of the management company.
Okay, thanks.
Donna, are you comfortable with giving your viewpoint or opinion on status quo, or allowing this to move over in the management agreement to NHA?
Oh my goodness, Scott, you would ask me that question, wouldn't you?
It's because we trust you and we know that you represent the best interest of the board.
I think the current system is a good one. And I would actually say that with regard to your board, and particularly your current principal, my observation is that you carry it out well and efficiently. One of the challenges that folks have sometimes is when the board gets too bogged down into the minutia. And I think the thinking of some folks is that perhaps the process would be more efficient if the EMO just did the whole thing. And I don't in particular know NHA's perspective on that, again, when I spoke with them about that provision, and my point was just to make sure you guys were aware that that was one of the changes. Not so much that it ought to go one way or the other, but just know that it's in there. NHA really didn't have a strong reaction. Perhaps they thought this was an opportunity to take advantage of that option that is available in the statute, but they didn't come with any particular sort of recommendation or desire or position that they told me. I think this might be one of those where if it's not broke, don't fix it. I do think there's value in, because as a board, you're supposed to have a policy making role. You're not supposed to be heavily involved, if at all involved, in day-to-day operations. And we talk about that from time to time, but there needs to be some balance there where you know enough about what's actually going on in your building, because you are responsible at the end of the day for the operation of the school. So I do think it's one of those places where the board has a brief opportunity to sort of peep into who are your teachers, what are the credentials of your teachers, and whatnot. So I think there's value, and if the process is handled efficiently, as you guys do, again, perhaps it's something that's not broken and doesn't need to be fixed.
I think I would have to say that I agree with that sentiment. I am from West Texas, and out in West Texas, we say, because we're always fixing stuff, right? Fixing to do this, fixing to do that. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Steve, has this process caused you any, our current state process of closed session, the reviews, you speaking to the candidates? In many cases, these candidates have already been employed.
Yes, for us, it's fine. We are never, my rule of thumb is I don't want to hire anybody. I wouldn't want my own child to be in their classroom. We are making sure that they are qualified, that they are licensed or license eligible, especially if they're coming from somewhere else or they're completing a program on top of their existing bachelor's or master's, that they have the life experience if they've been working, and that they are the best person to fit the need out of the candidates available. So what we do is we then contact the talent acquisition team at NHA and we say, of the candidates that we've interviewed and you have shared with us, and they are vetted as well. You know, they're vetted to make sure they're license eligible. They're vetted to make sure that
All the
transcripts
facts.
are received. So it's a dual approval that we get from NHA and get from you, and I'm perfectly happy with it, because we know that teachers we may hire. Scott, if you're a candidate, you might be a great fit for our building, but not for another one. And Diane might be a better fit for this building, but not for another school that she's, interviewing at. And so, we have a real fit rule and a fit focus that we use here at Peak. And so we, are perfectly happy with how things are.
All right.
And
So current
certainly
state
want
process.
we
sorry.
want your buy-in and your approval.
So you're comfortable with, and the current state process does not encumber the process of staffing.
No, especially as you said, where sometimes depending on the schedule of meetings, we have to have somebody in that classroom. So as long as they're vetted and approved, we go ahead and hire them with the know and the wherewithal that you all may still have to approve them. But thankfully, we haven't brought anybody to you that is a negative candidate or a non-licensable or eligible or somebody that doesn't have a degree and isn't qualified to be where they're at.
I think that's the board's expectation, because if you ever brought somebody that we looked at and frowned upon, we would say, what happened to Steve Pond? Where is he? Because of the nature in which you approach this process.
Yeah.
So from a discussion standpoint, board, please feel free to voice your opinion on this. I don't want to say I don't want to influence anybody. So please feel free to speak up if you have any concerns or if you have any leaning one way or the other.
My thought is I like the current situation, and it is very relevant to the procedure that Steve does the initial background, and he follows through with the whole process. to the success that we've had with the hiring of new teachers. And I like, it's not broken, keep it. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Diane. Others?
I agree with what Diane has just said, and probably most of you are aware that oftentimes charter schools, private schools, get negative reputations because of their staffing. And I think that as members of a board, we have a responsibility to make sure that our teachers represent the best of the candidates that are available. So I agree that we should leave it as it currently is.
Thank you, Dixie. Others? Barbara, Michelle?
Yeah,
Nick?
with the great success that we have had and are having, why would we change it? Leave it, please.
Very simply put, perfect. Michelle or Nick, do you guys want to throw in?
Yeah, I'll just agree with that. That's fine.
I agree as well. And it's not only do we not want to change something that's not broke, but also not provide an opportunity for someone else to change something that's not broke. You know, so I think it
A good point.
preserves Steve's ability going forward to do it the way he's doing it, rather than, you know, things might change by somebody else.
Yeah, good point, Nick. And I will share my opinion that I agree with each of you, because I see it as two different scenarios. It's status quo, which is not broken, which works very well, and in current state includes Steve as administration, the board, and NHA. The alternative, if we leave that in the upcoming or the new version of the management agreement, would be the board is removed. So I think a three-pronged approach just provides a more comprehensive and better vetting and agreement amongst all parties here, administration of the school, NHA, and the board. So Donna, I would say it sounds like the board is in agreement for removal of the whatever section, paragraph, clause, whatever's in there around the change to the hiring of teachers.
That sounds reasonable. And as I said before, NHA, based on our earlier conversations, was receptive to that as a general matter. And I certainly can convey to them as they're finalizing this document specifically for peak, that you guys have had a good conversation and are in favor of keeping it as it is. So it's likely, I would predict, that the document that you get, that language will remain as it is in the existing agreement.
Okay. Do we have a little board question to you guys? So Donna touched on the legal representation, and it sounds like that kind of transcends potentially, Donna, a couple different areas. Should we dive into that a little bit deeper? Is the legal representation a portion of the new management agreement that can be amended or changed or pulled?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I would really want to emphasize that my conversations with the NHA representatives, including their attorneys, have been very amicable. They've specifically said to me that they anticipate making all the changes that I've recommended needed to be made. And some of the attorney fee pieces had more to do with clarifying and just making sure we're clear, consistent with North Carolina law, and recognizing what areas of legal representation the school might need, and being clear who the parties are, and whatnot. So it had more to do with making sure that the language in the new document is very clear about those kinds of things, rather than there really, being a problem with it.
Does the current state language fundamentally change anything around the board and the board's legal representation?
No.
Okay. So it sounds like the remaining piece is around us understanding what we're agreeing to in a management agreement with respect to all other facets of NHA or the school liability, responsibilities, how that's represented. Does that fundamentally change anything from our current state? In other words, liability that Peak Charter Academy, not the board, if this can be separated, you'll have to help me understand. If it's not fundamentally changing the board's not opportunities, if it's not changing the board's abilities to seek and retain counsel, if it's not fundamentally changing that, are there changes that you've recognized in the current state management agreement versus the future state management agreement that has any type of detrimental, in your opinion, in your legal opinion, any type of detrimental impact on, say, for instance, the school as an entity, and I'm a parent and my child is injured. I'm just trying to think of a scenario. Is there anything that's fundamentally changed there? I mean, are they talking about increasing or improving the legal representation of the school?
No. So there's a couple of things. So far as sort of potential liability risk management kind of stuff, you're still going to be governed by the charter school provisions that require you to have certain coverage
Levels of, okay.
So that doesn't change at all. And there's nothing in the document that would attempt to change that. So far as the legal representation, let me give you an example, if I may. There was language that attempted to say, the board will have counsel for, and there's a phrase about sort of just general sort of advice about board governance. And then there was a phrase that suggested that NHA would would manage legal services for things like student disciplinary hearings. And so I pointed out that we have to be careful carving out things like that, because there's a state statute that's very, very, very specific about student disciplinary hearings and who has to do what. And the board has a very specific role. I can't recall if you guys did one in the past year or two, but if you were to get to this point, the statute is very clear that the principal has certain responsibilities, primarily for making a recommendation, for example, for a long-term suspension. And at that point, the board has a very specific responsibility for providing the student and the parent with a due process hearing. And typically, your counsel would provide legal representation to the board so that we make sure the board is doing its job. And then perhaps the principal would have separate legal representation. So this is an example of why I said to them in the language in their management agreement, I don't think they were attempting to do anything improper or anything of that sort, but that we have to be careful suggesting that NHA is going to manage legal services for a student disciplinary process, because the law in North Carolina gives the board a specific responsibility. And it wouldn't work for NHA to be overseeing legal counsel, that kind of thing. So it's those kinds of things that I have suggested we need to make sure there's clarity about. And I have every confidence that the final document that comes to you will accomplish that.
Sounds good. So let me ask you, what's your timeline expectation on concluding the I'm going to call it the clarifying process and tweaking that language in the agreement? Would this be something that we could achieve and look to take action on November, whatever our date is, November?
I think that's a reasonable goal, but we've had a good conversation here today about the management agreement, and I think that's very helpful, because again, my goal is that you guys are good to go when it's time to vote. But remember, the bigger picture and the main thing they're changing really has to do with financing, NHA's financing, and the ownership of the building. So those are the things that they've had to make sure are lined up, because you're going to have a different relationship. NHA won't be the landlord for your building. This new entity will be your landlord for the building. And so there is a new lease as well. We've reviewed that. There aren't as many changes, I would say, and the lease is longer because of the nature of the relationship between the parties. So there are a lot of moving parts. And NHA has explained, and I think they put the document in your packet again today, that one of the motivations for this is to take advantage of the current market, and for everybody to be able to have an overall financing arrangement that's more favorable going forward. Well, now is the time to do that. And I am not a finance person or a markets person or an investment person, but it makes logical sense that, you know, when you see that rates are low and whatnot, then sort of the generic now is the time to take advantage of them. And most of us appreciate that there will be a point sometime in the future where perhaps that won't be so favorable anymore. So, and in some ways I'm giving you sort of NHA's answer, and I welcome Khaditra to pipe in. So the goal is soon, the goal is now. But at the same time, NHA, I would say, has been very appreciative that this is, again, a significant undertaking. And they have repeatedly said to me, and I think they've said, I don't know if any of you all participated in the webinar a month or so ago, that they want boards to feel comfortable voting on this. So if that takes more time, less time, and every board's a little different. So the short answer to you is yes, let's plan to vote at your next regular meeting, but we'll just have to see what we have, and myself and I guess primarily Khaditra will keep you updated on that. I'm certainly, I expect to be in touch with NHA's attorney probably on at least a weekly basis, and I'll know, let's say by the end of next week, does it still look like we'll be able to do that?
Fair enough.
I'll
Thank
just
you.
echo what Donna is saying as well, as we want to make sure that you all are comfortable in making the decision. So just trying to make sure that the communication, you know, stays the way that it is. Donna has what she needs. She has the opportunity and the time allowed to review the documents to be able to share the information with you all. So however long that takes is what we will utilize, and hopefully it will be by the next meeting.
So board, comments or concerns around that? And each of you, I believe, let's do it this way. Speak up if you haven't, or if you, well, I'll just say it that way. Speak up if you have not had the opportunity to read through this in its entirety. Have you guys read through all the refinancing proposal documentation that's been provided to us? And it's okay. It's okay if somebody says no, that's fine.
This is Diane. I read through that, and at that time I sent some questions to Khaditra, and they were answered in her email. I'm not a finance person, and I sometimes needed some, and still do, clarification in the that element of the agreement. But at this point, I don't have that in front of me, but Khaditra did a nice job of consolidating and answering those questions that I had, and it didn't trigger anymore for me. I have a very basic understanding, and I just feel very comfortable with Donna's explanation now of how we're moving forward with this, and I totally trust her. And of course, Khaditra's background with where we stand right now, and with the clarifications that Donna's waiting for. I think it will further, just speaking personally, it'll further make my understanding and the ability to vote more favorable.
Thanks, Diane. Anyone else want to throw in on that?
I've read through everything and I attended the webinar, and I don't have any questions about anything at this point. I thought they've done a good job explaining everything. So,
you know, Michelle and I may be the two board members that may have the most overall comprehension of what's being proposed here. And understanding and knowing that what NHA is presenting to us is factual, or working off of that premise. In other words, stating that NHA is our corporate partner. I do not see them ever providing misleading or false information. That's not inherent to the partnership, in my opinion. I will say that I see a distinct financial advantage in this for the school and for our operating budget, which simply means, and I hate to say it this way, but we all know that basically everything we deal with in society these days gets monetized. And that's what this really breaks down to, is a financial advantage for the school as an operating entity, and reducing our cost and increasing our cash flow, which can be used, and I'm going to say it this way at the high level, at the board's discretion, within all appropriate guidance and rules, that provides us with a financial advantage for support of the school. And when I say support, all things within the school. I don't have any apprehensions about the proposed refinance plan. I will ask Donna, I'll ask you one more question. So I say one more, I'll ask you one more question right this minute. So we have a current state management agreement, and we all know what the situation is: NHA, the lease, our costs. We have a proposed refinance situation, which takes perfectly legal advantage of how to structure. The new entity being formed that will own the property, Donna, am I clear on this? It's actually an entity owned by NHA.
No, it is not
No?
owned by NHA. Khaditra, maybe you can weigh in on that. I'm fairly certain it is not owned by NHA.
Correct. You're talking about Campus Partners One, correct?
Right.
Yes, they're a separate 501c3 entity. So it's separate from NHA, if that answers the question.
So,
But
so
is
they
it
are
related in any way to NHA?
Thank you, Michelle. Yep.
The only thing that they had in common is a former board member. So one of their board members was previously affiliated with NHA.
Yeah. That's the sense that I got in some of the Q&A, I think, that I saw.
And don't get me wrong, I don't have any concerns about whether NHA owns the newly formed, or I say newly formed, the new entity being introduced here as a property owner. I don't really have any concerns with that, because again, I think there's enough regulatory guidance over how NHA operates and how each state operates, that this has been well vetted legally. So I don't have any concerns with that. So Donna, circling back to my question, we have a current state management agreement, which it looks as though we're about to amend or change to the new management agreement with our new structuring of the ownership of the school and all things involved there. Should this fall out of favorable market conditions at any point in the future, NHA as our corporate partner would have to come back and propose an updated or an amended or changed management agreement should any of the financial advantage of this start to disappear in NHA's opinion or analysis, and they wanted to change that. That would be presented to the board as a new management agreement or new structure, correct?
That's correct. Remember, all of this is in the context of you having a charter from the State Board of Education. And the management agreement, currently services agreement, was a part of your charter application, which was approved by the state board. And these changes would be considered a material revision to your charter. So it has to go to the State Board of Education for approval. And NHA is aware of that. So that, again, it's one part of the process. So yeah, any changes to your management agreement would be considered a material change to your
Material
charter,
to the,
and
gotcha.
you would have to go through that process.
Well, board, unless I'm mistaken, and forgive me, because I see we're at 5 to the top of the hour, and you know how my job gets in the way of my volunteering. So with that said, and I don't believe we need to take any type of, I don't know what the recordable action is here, Donna, you may have to advise, but what I'm hearing and what I'm recognizing from our board conversation is that we will have facility refinance as on the first Tuesday in November. I don't know what date that is, sorry. That we will have the facility refinance discussion, hopefully being the review or the discussion around the final document. Donna, would you anticipate that we would be able to have that document in some days in advance of the actual?
That would absolutely be the goal. And,
okay.
and I mean, I salute you guys in having this conversation today, because I do think it's a process. But any review you guys can do of those things outside your meeting and shoot questions to me or Khaditra, so that you have as much clarity as you can once you're in a meeting and getting ready to vote. That I will do my part to try to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. From a discussion standpoint, then I think in kind of a planning aspect. So our expectation as a board is that we would have a final draft of this agreement at some point reasonably ahead of the first Tuesday in November meeting. Board, our responsibility would be to read through that drafted proposed management agreement. And I think that we can address it this way. We're very open. We ask questions, we share questions. Khaditra's great about getting us answers on that. So this is what I would say is that I'd like to see us being able to have that agreement. I'm going to say at a minimum 2 calendar days ahead of the first Tuesday. And again, I apologize, I don't know what date that is, but that we would have that that drafted agreement, a minimum of 2 calendar days. And this is going to fall on a Sunday and a Monday, just because we know it's first Tuesday. And that the board's responsibility would be to fully review the draft, be prepared to present and share any questions that you would have. In absence of any questions or further conversations with respect to the proposed or the drafted agreement, any absence of any questions, I think we need to basically conclude that as no further questions if from you individually as board members, and be prepared at the first Tuesday in November to have active discussion on this. I don't see us spending a lot of time on review because we'll have many other agenda items for first Tuesday in November, but that we be prepared at that time, based on the provision that all of this does get worked out in the course of the next couple of weeks. That's a caveat, that we be prepared at that time on their first meeting in November to go ahead and have this as an action item to go ahead and adopt, or not, but to address from the standpoint of a motion and a vote, to address the facility refinance, or i.e. the management agreement at that time. Are we all okay with that?
Much agreed.
Yes, that sounds fine. But we only have 10 business days basically before our next meeting.
Well, Donna better get busy then. Just,
Understood.
I think we may have to take Donna out to dinner as soon as going out to dinner is one of those things you can do.
That's a thought.
All right, so I see that we are at the top of the hour. We have already taken action on the approval of the face coverings policy. We have a motion. We had a roll call on that. I don't believe we have any other items. And I'm sorry, Khadija, we had number 5, closed session. Why did we have closed session as part of our agenda?
Yeah, Sarah just had listed just in case you needed it. It was already included on there. But since you don't need it, it's fine.
Understood. Okay. Just want to make sure we're not missing anything.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Well,
before
with that, go
before we
ahead. Sorry.
adjourn, that's okay. I just want the board to know that I will be out of the office from Monday, October 18th, and I will be returning on October 26th. So I will be taking a vacation. So I just wanted us to know that if I don't respond to something, that is why, but I'm going to put my director's email on my out of office. And if you need anything, he will be more than willing to assist you.
Good. You deserve a vacation, and you deserve not to lose all your PTO because you work all the time.
Exactly. Thank you.
So good for you. All right, board, before we have a motion for adjournment, any other comments, questions, concerns before we part for today?
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank all of you guys. All right, so I believe we need to have a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
This is
Diane,
Dixie.
I second it.
Quick roll call.
Scott,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Dixie,
Yes.
Nicholas.
Yes.
All right. And Michelle had to step off at 12:58, so that will be documented in the minutes.
Okay, and we still have quorum, so I think we're good to go. Nick, thanks for joining. I know how work keeps you very busy, so thanks for carving that time out. Thanks to all of you. And we will see you then on, Tuesday, November 2nd. Hello, it's right there at the bottom of the agenda. I do know the date. The second, or the first Tuesday is November 2nd. So thank you guys very much. Stay positive, test negative, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
everybody, for your
everybody.
support.
Bye. Thank
That's
you.
right.
Have a great weekend.
Here.